Hello, welcome to another podcast. Yes, last week we had kind of like a roundup of how we were feeling. We had our election panel, our post-election panel, and we did talk about everything that happened during Tuesday's Atlanta shooting. When it comes to a lot of these conversations, I know we'll have a lot of fun conversations, but when it comes to things like stop AAPI hate and Black Lives Matter, it's always going to be a constant conversation. Given that, today I asked Eric Sunada to be on to give us some wisdom. He as folks from the podcast know, he is a housing advocate for the San Gabriel Valley. I mentioned also he is from JPL and worked on the small. What was the name of the helicopter on Mars again?
Ingenuity.
Ingenuity. Yeah.
Ingenuity,
So
correct.
hopefully, we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. But I think the elephant in the room right now is to talk about and address the the alarming rate of like violence against elderly Asian Americans. When we're recording this right now, it's Thursday. Tomorrow is going to be an action. Is going to be a march from San Gabriel City Hall to Alhambra. So I think after this podcast, some of us will be there. When this podcast comes out, it's already going to be a little bit over, but we're gonna it just means that it continues. The work continues. There are people still calling for to address what had happened in Atlanta as a hate crime. There are folks right now, given what happened in Colorado, to really, really look into what gun control could look like. Hopefully I can have a conversation later about that, maybe on a different podcast. But I think today we want to really focus in on the Asian American community and especially our elders. I know Eric Sonata. I know you may not consider yourself an elder in the community.
Well, I'm old. I'm old. Yeah, but
Really, I
yeah,
never noticed.
yeah,
but
yeah.
I think I want to open up by you've been going to a lot of town halls and a lot of community events, and
Mhm.
whatever you're comfortable with.
Sure.
I want to
Yeah.
ask: Have you seen anything either towards you or towards anybody else in the community? I know recently, Little Tokyo, the temple in Little Tokyo was vandalized. The two lamps in front were knocked over, and then two lampposts, wooden lampposts, were burnt down. So, sorry.
Yeah.
So the great thing though is that organized by a progressive Japanese American group, they that's not their name, by the way. I'll
Mhm.
find the name for them and put that in the description. But there was a group that organized a GoFundMe, and I think raised um, almost $100,000 the last I checked, almost $100,000 to cover the damages and like upgrade their security. So yeah. Well, I want to start
Absolutely.
by asking if you're comfortable, if you have any
Sure.
experience.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. I was born in Los Angeles, and
Hmm.
uh, during my formative years, it was in areas of where Asians were definitely the minority in number by far, right? So it was
Hmm.
mostly white neighborhoods, or non-Asian, non-AAPI neighborhoods, and yeah, it was exhausting, right? It's a common occurrence what they call aggressions. Microaggressions were a daily, if not hourly, type thing.
Hmm.
Um, Aggressions, and that was in the late '60s through the '70s. And you could kind of see the trend where um, the more serious aggressions and crimes are kind of reflective of the economic times as well, right? So
Hmm.
we saw when uh, uh, during the Vincent Chin episode with the economic crisis and the
Mm-hmm.
blaming Japanese automakers for the depressed conditions in Detroit, and in the 90s with the strong presence of Japanese companies coming into downtown LA, buying a lot of real estate, and you see a lot more hate during those times. And I definitely see a tie between the economic times and that more than anything really. And um, yeah, but in terms of on the ground type of aggressions, yeah, common, just derogatory names all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty common for those of us who grew up here, during these times. Um, yeah, I mean, I remember, going to with a group of friends who were also Asian during high school and going to a bowling alley. It happened to be in Orange County, somewhere. This is in the late 70s, and you know, with these other kids that they're there calling us gooks and things like that. And you know, by that age, you feel like you've got to push back, right? You've got to push back
Mm-hmm.
to let them know. And you do. You stand up there, and if you get in fights, that's the cost of it. But after a while, you just get so tired, right? It's that
Mm-hmm.
you say to yourself, "Well, I'm going to take a day off. I'm just not going to do. I'm just whatever." Um, so, and it's kind of sad that it's still that way to a lot of people. I think maybe it's not as common or it's not as in your face, but it's there. And those types of things. I remember one time, uh, Dodger Stadium. We were in the parking lot trying to get out, and this is the time when Hideo Nomo was pitching, and it was a lot of Asians in the crowd, and uh, bumper to bumper traffic. And I remember these white kids, probably young adults, and walking around the car and seeing that I'm Asian, my wife's in the car as well, and saying, "Hey, there's Nomo, let's get him," blah blah blah. And they probably for rooting for the other team, but he starts um, saying he's going to piss on my car. He pulls down his pants and starts pissing on the back tire, right? So
Oh, jeez.
that type of thing, and it's like, oh gosh, what am I going to say? So um, yeah, but and I have to say that my father, at my parents' age, they were here in the 50s and 60s, and
Mm-hmm.
what 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 we call aggressions now, they wouldn't think twice about, right? They're talking, especially I come from a blue collar family, and I mean it's in your face then, right? And it is violent sometimes and
Mm-hmm.
physical, so yeah, it's yeah, but on the other hand, I would just wanted to I feel there's something also gross about calling um, what are aggressions and microaggressions as hate crimes. Sometimes, you know, there's no excuse for that type of stuff, but it's, to me, sometimes it's gross when I see, as we saw with the recent incidents, where some of these Hollywood actors, Asian actors, are putting out what amounts to bounties for
Mm-hmm.
to go do after perpetrators. And there's something gross about that. Well, especially when the perpetrator is caught on video as being another person of color, right? Then you're
Mm-hmm.
you're 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 falling to that same trap where the establishment is actually throwing us against each other like that. That's
Yeah.
not to be mistaken for what happens in Georgia. I mean, certainly. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
just crazy. That's got to be prosecuted and brought to justice right away. No question about it. I'm not saying that others aren't to be brought to justice, but there's something about what I think the one thing we may have learned from the 80s and 90s was that um, being tough on crime type
Mm-hmm.
of attitude is really plays into the carceral state and the pro-police population, and which is a lot of the people who um, are in power, who are all for more policing, and it's very
Yeah.
difficult. It's we have to be careful not to fall into that trap where they co-opt that message, and
I
in other words,
remember,
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
I remember that time when yeah, you're referencing, I think it was like Olivia Munn put up like, $20,000 to help investigate, someone that was like close to her that, got assaulted in New York. At least I believe it was New York. And then like, well, I saw that in a way of like, isn't it sad that she had to do that? That she had to put like money up for that, like it wouldn't just be a crime that police would even care about unless there was money involved
Yeah.
by a private party. And I looked at it in that way.
Hmm.
Another thing is that, yeah, I'm afraid that there are going to be those communities that would try to contextualize that model minority myth of like, oh yeah, we're Asians, and like I even had that in a comment recently on my, I think you saw saw that,
Yeah.
somebody saying like, oh yeah, do you think like it's nice to see Asian Americans actually protest, more civil than the Black
Yeah.
community, and I'm like, why are we playing
Right.
into this game? Why are we like
Yeah.
there was context, and you brought up Vincent Chin, and you brought up all of these other events where Asian Americans either found solidarity in other communities of color, like Vincent Chin, when basically it was like those two guys were going to get a slap on the
Hmm.
wrist and an
Yeah.
$8,000 fine. You had Jesse Jackson and the Black community coming up. It's like, this is wrong. You
Yeah.
know, the
Right.
community
Right.
really came together. And I think part of the reason of that is like none of that history is even taught in like the high school or the elementary school level. And it's like,
Yeah.
these things are important. Like these things happen because of the context of the civil rights movement. And like
Yes.
it really, really irks me that apparently in our textbook the civil rights movement started and ended with Martin Luther King,
Mm. Yep.
and it kind of disregards the other voices of like Malcolm X, Angela Davis, even folks like Billie Holiday, the first, like one of the artists that really started that conversation of like lynchings are happening, and like we were and she
Yep.
got punished for that. The FBI basically killed
Yep.
Billie Holiday.
Yeah.
So
Right.
so
Right.
I think it's like a two thing. It's like it's this idea that unless we put money up front, people will care. And then the other end is like it's forgetting that there is a context that like communities of color has came to the aid of Asian Americans.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
But
I agree. Yeah, and yes, it goes back to that thing of that, yeah, having to put up money in order for people to care and to get attention, and the invisibility that you know that we're in, and um, yeah, and just on the flip side of that, we have to remember that um, we 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 that invisibility sometimes is can be seen as a benefit from some compared to like the blacks, right? They would all be happy for
mhm,
invisibility in terms of racial profiling by the police, right? So
mhm,
um, from that regard, we have to, you know, um, uh, keep in the context that, and I'm not saying that we need to fight against Asian hate, of course we do, but we also need to keep in the context that we don't want to flatten it where we co-opt messages and we don't, I'm really happy and I'm really, especially with the young folks, I knew that they would be smarter than this, but and I'm happier for the older generation too, that they're not using any kind of monikers like Asian Lives Matter, right? Because that would be
mhm.
co-opting Black Lives Matter, and
Yeah.
they recognize that, and it's important not to flatten those types of things, and so yeah, but that invisibility
Mhm.
is one of those things where yeah, it's yeah, going back to the model minority myth and how they uh, use that as a way to uh, they use this as a cudgel against other people of color, saying, look, if they can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, why can't you, and all that bullshit, right?
Yeah, it
And
was like
yeah.
in the context of like 50s and 60s conversation of like, oh yeah, we interned these people and look at them now, they're owning
Yeah,
businesses and doing this all over
yeah,
again. It's like there
yeah,
was no support. Like I don't think
yeah,
like even in the 80s, I think when was it Reagan that first made an apology, and then I think
yeah,
later down the line there was like some form of compensation, but like that doesn't even begin to start addressing what the Japanese American community has gone through, especially, like their war service, the internment, the loss of property, the loss of dignity in some cases.
yeah,
We
sure.
just finished Farewell to Manzanar between me and my dad. It's like we're trying to understand, like, the Asian American struggle, you know, like it just doesn't end.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Again, so talking about, my experiences here. So I was here during the '92 riots
Mm,
and Latasha Harlins and all that. And one of the things is that there's that uh, uh, the post 1965 immigration where those immigrants from Asia uh, were were handpicked, right? I mean, the United States selected what they call the cream of the crop, right? Highly educated or well-to-do. And um, what was really, you know, sad about so we have a lot of professionals in their own country coming over, immigrating. A lot of Korean population, because I was born in the Pico Union area near Koreatown, so I see this happening, right? A lot of Korean influx, and these are
mhm,
professionals back in Korea who are really skilled and you know um, come from more well-to-do families. That being said, I mean the whole country was torn apart by war and things, but
mhm,
they couldn't get jobs in their professions that they were used to back at home because of the gatekeeping that's done here. I mean, the professional classes put all these criteria on people to keep them
mhm,
out, and they're thrown out to scrape by however they can. And the one difference I think between the post 1965 immigrants and pre 1965 is that they have they have some wherewithal, right? And they can become successful. They decide
mhm.
to open their own businesses a lot of times, right? And
Right.
again, they're not able to open businesses except for depressed areas, with the black populations and things like that. And there was some culture clashes and things, but
Mhm,
um, the so there's a difference between that. So yeah, these people succeeded, and um, but you know, it's a little bit different from the pre 1965. Like my family came, great grandparents came in one case, and my grandparents on my father's side came from Japan. But I mean, they came as indentured labor, and
mhm,
and it's a little different. And they also were redlined and had to, they lived in the same neighborhoods as blacks, but they didn't necessarily have the wherewithal to open businesses or things like that. So they're not perceived as competing economically like the Korean population was. That really, you know, when the powers that be don't increase the pie and everyone's thrown
mhm.
in to fight against each other, there's a lot of resentment there and things. And yeah, and so
I think it's also really tough to even ask the communities that immigrated post 64, 65, that like, for them to understand the context of like immigration. And I think I'm learning this now of, when talking to my when talking to
sure,
my parents about like other like Chinese exclusion or Japanese American internment, the Filipino and Chicano movement towards farm unions and all of those things, like all of those things, they exist, but because they had to hustle, because they had to like work hard, because they
yeah,
still had to work for themselves. Like I don't necessarily think they understand the context of all like Asian American hate. Like I think they still
yeah,
kind of still buy into that model minority thing, because it is something that they just know. And the thing that I try to get into certain communities is that when you immigrate and when you become a citizen, you inherit everything. You inherit all the burdens, both positive and negative, of the United States. You know, you're part of the context of this community that all struggle or successful together. You know, like
Yeah.
it's not all just one idea of success. And I
Right.
think it's just
Yep.
opened that eye of like, there is solidarity, there is people that was really talking about this situation. And when it comes to you know, yellow peril for Black lives, you know, like trying to say like, let's break that down. Like, you know, success in the Black community shouldn't fly in the face in the success of the Asian American community, and vice
Right.
versa. You know,
Yeah.
like
Right.
the situation of the 92 riots is that I think to some degree the community thought that they were going to be shielded by the police, right?
Yeah.
But when it was found out that, like, you know, the police did not come for the Korean community, you
Right.
know, the
Right.
police did not
Exactly.
come for the Black community.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think post that, I think there was a big learning for both communities to understand, like, we're both
Yeah.
are gonna, like, whether or not we buy into the model minority myth, we're both are gonna be cut to the curb
Yeah.
when the chances are, when the chips are down, and everybody is like in the middle of a once in a century pandemic and economic crisis. Yeah, it's gonna be real.
Yeah. Exactly. And yeah. Yeah. Good point. And yeah, like you say, yeah, recent immigrants, they don't, and sometimes they're mistaken that they seem to not care, but they may not have the context, they may not have the background knowledge yet, and so it's not necessarily fair. And I think that, like you say, it's basically solidarity, right, against that neoliberal, that predatory neoliberal system is basically, you know, is just keeping everyone fighting against each other. And
Mhm.
and like you mentioned, we have these identities, right? We have the Asian identity, the AAPI identity, the Black identity, and those identities are crucial, absolutely crucial. They need to vocalize the issues, their needs,
Mhm.
and but what I think is even more important is the solidarity amongst these identities against
Mhm.
this predatory capitalism, racial capitalism, and it that's essentially, like you say, it's preventing people from living with dignity, right? And um, that's what's really needed to me, especially in San Gabriel Valley here, where we have, our four cities, San Gabriel, Rosemead, Monterey Park, and Alhambra, have a lower area median income. We have
Mhm.
a we have huge stratification amongst the Asian population here. We have extreme wealth in places like San Marino, and we have poverty in some of the other groups within the
Right,
Asian
definitely.
diaspora. So, um, yeah, we just need that solidarity.
that
Yeah,
that's a thing that I try to let folks know, or at least understand, like parents understand. It's like, you know, to some degree, like the model minority may be true for you, but like if you like segregate the data from all Asian backgrounds, it's like the Southeast Asian community, and I'm identify as Cambodian American, you know, like we have the lower high school graduation rate. We have the lowest income of any group of the Asian Americans, and putting this label as for us to be, hey, we're all successful, full tilt, let's not ask any questions, we're all successful. Like, I think that's a bullshit argument. I think we need to really tackle the issues that all of the communities are going through. You know, like
mhm.
we're not the bling empire or the
I think,
house of
yeah,
Ho sort of
right,
situation
right,
where
right.
where representation aside, showing these communities that like as uber rich, I think plays into that
Absolutely,
myth that we're
absolutely,
all just rich somehow.
absolutely, right, right. And I struggle with this when I was younger, and like you say, the model minority. If you buy into that and you strive to be upwardly mobile, you know, to some extent, you are complicit in this predatory neoliberal system, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to some extent, you're saying, I'll accept, you know, wealth and upward mobility in exchange for buying into and letting, not protesting this system that
Mm-hmm.
keeps other people of color down, right? Especially the Black, Latinx populations,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and so I say that we have in here this microcosm of our four cities here, and then we have San Marino, right? And who's bought into that culture of model minority and that whole tiger mom culture of you know trying to game the system and become upwardly mobile. And I ask people here, is that what you want? Do you are you is that what because that sometimes you hear these people the way they're talking about our area here and the lower income people, and it seems like that's what they strive for, San Marino, and it scares the hell out of me. And so I try to fight against that. Look at my own institution. I work at for Caltech at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and it's considered an elite institution. They've had success, and they get applicants from all over the world, cream of the crop. Um, and um, there's there is some, in my opinion, there is some rightful resentment that there's sort of a bamboo ceiling to some extent in some cases there. And part of me says, and there's some focus there where people have groups to try to see how can we work within the system to make sure that we get through that bamboo ceiling, right? But when I step back and look at the big picture, though, that's essentially saying, well, I'm not necessarily wanting to change the status quo. I'm just want the status quo to work better for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
say that because, um, you know, we benefit from this false meritocracy of saying that we worked our way up there. Well, we got a lot of help. Let's be honest. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
at least I can say that for my case, right? Uh, had good schools here. College wasn't too expensive back in the day. Um, and but now that's not the case. And should we really be trying to work for the standpoint that we have to change this whole system here? Why is it that we are hiring based on this false meritocracy, where the best resume of uh, you know, of course, there's these when you elite institution where you have all these applications from all over the world, where you have people saying that, okay, I went to this prep school, I went to this Ivy League, I got this award, this fellowship. They had tutoring when they were kids, they went
Mm-hmm.
to fancy prep schools, and saying that ranking that as a merit,
Yeah.
and that would just perpetuate what we're seeing here, and what we're seeing with the keeping people of color down, right? So, you know, we always say that, you know, we need to work against that, to become traders and to um, recognize all oppressed people, right? And that's going back to the the Asian American movement, where they were very much so about third world liberation front and uh, helping all oppressed people and understanding that and in solidarity. And I'm seeing some great things from the young folks here. I saw you at a rally that was organized by two local
Right.
first time organizers, which is great. That's the type of rallies we need to go to, where they're going to speak truth to power. The rallies that are organized by officials and officialdom, they're often power. So, you get people speaking, but they're not saying anything, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I was so heartened to see words and signs of like anti-Asian violence cannot be separated from U.S. imperialism, and more police present is not the answer, and focusing on root cause, right? And as opposed to, I saw one rally here, and I didn't go to it, but I saw some words and signs that says, war on crime, justice for all, and united against hate, tough on crime, tough on criminals,
Hmm.
and that's falling back into the problem we had in the 80s and 90s, where we increased the carceral state so much, and it's treating the symptoms rather than causes, which makes the symptoms just worse, right? It just makes the system worse. And
Yeah, it's not even
so,
asking of the community of like at what quality do we want our justice or our police system would be. It's just saying add more. It's like if you add more, you're going to play
yeah,
into
yeah,
the issues that are
yeah,
brought up within Black Lives Matter. And I think, and to a certain degree, I really do believe that police have been over militarized, or like there's an
yeah,
overemphasis on police in communities. And I know this might alienate some of my friends, but like I want to say, like, it's about quality. It's about the quality of our police to be effective, and if we are just pushing everything, all of our social ills, every single thing that could be wrong, either it's a mental illness or that could actually be remedied by somebody other than a police officer. Like if we over police, then what does that mean? Like you're getting somebody to deal with a mental health issue with someone with a gun. And does that make sense? You're gonna get somebody to de-escalate a situation with the option to take away somebody's life.
right,
And
yeah, right,
and
yeah,
for us as the
yeah,
Asian American community, I don't know if that's going to be the best thing, because I think we've often laid, well, I guess the like post 65 community have overly leaned on police to deal with our issues.
yeah. And to me, that's a key. That doesn't change. Like, let's give an example, like in San Gabriel Valley here, Alhambra, which has the city with the largest number of Asians in the San Gabriel Valley, and we're also a majority here. The police budget is crazy, right? Okay, so 70%, or I think it's like 72% of our city budget is dedicated and earmarked for public safety, right? We're talking, I think 55 million out of 75 million or so is for public safety. And most of that is for the police. And yet we have people arguing and asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars for fair housing or community services or translation services, interpretation services at meetings, right?
Right.
And yet, and we're talking tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars that we scrape for. In the meantime, we've got $55 million every year dedicated to public safety, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and where crime rates had been going down pre-COVID, right? And again, it's all about the the whiteness as property norm, where they're so worried about protecting private property, and the same folks that are wanting to keep from affordable housing coming in, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's got to change. It's otherwise. And here in Alhambra, where we've seen studies after studies, in the late 80s, 90s, some academics came in the mid to late 90s. Another academic came in to this PhD dissertation in the mid-aughts to 2010. Another academic came in, and each of the books that they put out specifically on this area, you get these books, and I could send you the titles of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's repeating the same thing and showing you that little progress that has been made, and the things on Asians of the dog whistles of we don't want this development. We don't want this Asian motif. In Alhambra, we had signs that said a couple of Asian businesses were taken over by eminent domain, and then a sign goes up on those buildings later saying American restaurant wanted here, type of thing, right? So,
Wow, really?
yeah, and if that type of thing can happen here, where we're a majority Asian, that's not acceptable, right? And
Yeah, I think what in the most recent context, didn't Monterey Park try to force all Asian businesses to have Romanized letters?
was that right? Is that right? Okay, I
I
know that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was like maybe like 10 to 15 years ago at this
Oh,
point.
okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Absolutely that. That's absolutely right. That, and to her credit, Judy Chu and Mike Ng and others there pushed back on that, right? And they it was terrible time, right? The late 80s and
hmm
90s when that was happening, and they rightfully pushed back and they were successful on that. But that still happens today, and to some extent, Alhambra and other San Gabriel were stunted in that way, and we haven't pushed back as hard, and it still goes on. And that's why I cringe whenever I see, uh, you know, quality of life and our way of living and our motif of we want to preserve our the look of our buildings and things. That, a lot of times those are dog whistles, right,
hmm
for anti-Asian um, rhetoric, and not all the times, but oftentimes. But I really cringe when our Asian population here sometimes buys into that, right? And
hmm
without context and without knowledge of how bad that was for us and how, uh, we need to look back on that and be careful there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
Definitely. I think, you brought up Judy Chu, Mike Ng, and Judy Chu historical. She was one of the first reps in Congress to represent Asian Americans, and I think last election cycle, whether whether the Asian community like it or not, there was two more from the Korean community that is now representing. I know lean Republican, but still still historic. Like I don't remember a
yeah,
Korean community member being elected into Congress, or at least I haven't had a notion yet.
yeah,
But recently Grace Ming was saying that she won't vote for any of Biden's newer cabinet or members if they're not at least a person of color or someone that's Asian American. And
yeah,
I was like thinking of that I like the idea. I know where it comes from. It also is like it's little tinges of like affirmative action a little bit there, but I think my thing is that it goes back to the blue no matter who sort of
uh-huh,
conversation,
yeah,
like
yeah,
or black faces at high places. It's like I like the idea, but the work still comes from the community,
yeah, right, right.
that, or at least the communities we live in. And I wonder if that's if
Yeah,
that's a good answer to our solution, or it's something that like it's a little hit or miss. And
yeah,
I understand that there is a bamboo ceiling. You mentioned that before when it comes to being in leadership or things like
yeah.
that. But yeah, well, what
Yeah,
do you think?
yeah. To me, I have a problem with that. I heard Mazie Hirono also, senator, said the same type of thing, that they're not going to support Biden's pick unless they get an AAPI person on his
Hmm.
cabinet. But that's where I don't get me wrong. I
Hmm.
identities are crucial, absolutely necessary,
Right,
like I said.
definitely.
But where identity politics is that I don't like is that type that stops short and is really uh, it just continues to promote uh, the predatory neoliberalism, right? And so, to me, I'd much rather have someone who's going to be helping to you know help help the poor, right?
Hmm.
And the disenfranchised, and the form of identity politics that you know allows predatory and racial capitalism to reign um, in exchange for a place at the table is not the type of identity politics I support, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so you know representation, like I I hear getting people elite institutions trying to fight their way into there. Gosh, it seems like there's so much more to fight for and that affects so many other people, including blacks, right? And that it's more important that we have that solidarity than necessarily all that energy at that type of representation, I think. So I
Right.
know sometimes people don't agree with me on that, but yeah,
Yeah,
anyway,
I think this might be a polarizing conversation, but
yeah, yeah,
I do want to focus in on like the leaders that are like local in that level. Like Long Beach just recently had their first city rep that was of Cambodian descent. You know, like
yeah,
how long has the
yeah,
Cambodian
exactly.
community have been here in the United States, and we just only have our first representative for the city
Yeah,
of Long Beach? I'm like,
right.
that doesn't make sense
Right,
to me.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, and by all means, if they are um, supportive of
Hmm.
the oppressed, and you know, and especially with the Cambodian community, with the colonized, the refugees, which you know they should be, if they're supportive and they can identify with that and they have personal experience with their family, by all means, they should have been elected a long time ago, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And um, on the other hand, you know, we may have AAPI officials who totally buy into uh, the opposite, right? That they totally buy into the white supremacy culture, you
Hmm.
know, the property is king culture, exclusion, um, and which to me is damaging, right? So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I do
yeah,
hope that like maybe down the line, I'm sure Judy Chu is also doing this, but like promoting younger talent, younger advocates, younger people into the space. You know, on a previous podcast, you know, I really got into like a thing that how like Nancy Pelosi is like when questioned why haven't you gotten more younger people in part of the Democratic Party and like more people of color, and you know like it was met with a combative tone. It's like, don't you know how long have I been part of this and like how much I
mm,
worked? And it's like that shouldn't matter. You should be the leader to promote younger talent, younger individuals. I don't know if that comes from a place where the donors don't like it. I know we were
yeah,
talking a lot about like neoliberalism, and a big thing about that is like corporate dollars funding, you know, candidates
right, right,
and things like
yeah.
that. So
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you know, and you, so you bring that up. I'm somewhat critical of the Asian political establishment here in the San Gabriel Valley. Like, based on what I know at the
Mhm,
street level, at the ground level, I don't see that happening. To be honest, you know, and
mm,
I don't see Judy Chu and Mike Yang uh, promoting that youth. You know, I think that they have a definite donor class. You know, where it can reproduce that type of power, but it's mostly at the professional managerial level, right? It's
mhm,
not at the working class level, which we have a significant size population here and lower income population here. And so I don't see that. And to me, it's like, you know, I'm really hopeful that our younger generation can break away from that, you know, and to uh, you know, recognize that, you know, and articulate the material needs that we have here, um, and the jobs, you know, the high housing costs um, and other material needs, and to articulate that and to not just necessarily ask the um, for sympathy from power and ask for the good graces of people that they get granted certain amenities, but to come together in solidarity
yeah.
with, you know, Latinx brothers and sisters, and to take that power. You know, it's really and to recognize also here that, you know, we have our our you know, we're largely a Latinx Asian binary here in this West San Gabriel Valley, but we also have to recognize that um, there are a lot of other lower income groups here as well, and also the fact that our percentage of the Black population here is really low
Right.
based on past real estate practices that kept the blacks out of the area, right? I mean, I think it's on the order of 1% most of the area, 2% for Alhambra, when the county is at 9%, and there's a reason for that. And, the predatory real estate or racial capitalism associated with that. And, to recognize that and to come together and yeah. So, I like you said, that our youth is I think is on the right path. I'm hoping, and I'm seeing a lot of good things. So yeah,
I I really hope so, because it's folks like AOC, it's folks like Nina Turner.
yeah,
I know I'm like naming off a lot of like female
yeah,
of color, but it does. A lot
yeah,
of communities, a lot of leadership needs to be recognized within these younger communities, and
yeah,
I think like those legacy like Nancy Pelosi and like the Dianne Feinstein, like they've all did their part, but you could only do that job for so long. And then I know this is terrible for me to say, but it's like, yeah, it becomes like an ageist sort of conversation, but like it's that new generation that's going to have to live in the country, that has to work in our means, that would have to address the issues in the context that we're going to be here for like the next 40 to 50 years. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think the that's the problem. Why we have a lot of folks who are willing to back Trump, right? That they see a lot of that elitism on the traditional DNC and the donor class, and how they often look down, and in their sense of wokeness, they and privilege, they control the culture conversation a lot of times, and they look down on those who are of lesser means, and Hillary Clinton's term of deplorables at one time. And these are people who are hurting economically, right? And that's what gets them willing to back Trump, because Trump, for all his bad things, what he said was that, and I'm no fan of Trump, believe me, but what it was that the one thing he was promising to do was to get rid of that elitism, right? And obviously, that was a Hail Mary that was just false and all that.
Was
But
not the case.
yeah, right. And so, yeah, so that really, so I agree. And so I really think that, the new movement by the young folks, and gosh, we need it, because what really scares me is how the Asian community here in the West Singapore River Valley is being pulled to the right. We do see organizing of anti-homeless shelter, anti-low-income housing.
Temple City.
Temple City, right. And we had the group, an Asian group here that was protesting the election results. Right, they had to stop the steal protests out here several weekends in a row, and these are organized groups who tend to be evangelical, very culturally conservative, and there's also the aspect of the immigrant populations, anti-communist, who come from, Vietnam, Taiwan, who tend to be
Vietnam, Taiwan, Hong Kong, I'm Cambodian, like we probably like, yeah, I live in it.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's another thing that I don't think we've talked about when it comes to the I guess the Democratic Party is like seeing us as the constant, like for sure shot for the minority community, and like I think that really has that hidden thing of like, okay, so you rely on us on our vote, but you're not going to do anything about our material condition. So like, right. I think that's why to some degree, folks are being pushed to conservative ends. I don't know if that's either a good or bad thing. I just know that if they're not going to see themselves in a party, then they're going to move on to the next thing.
That's right.
And
that's exactly right.
That's what's happening right now. That's what I saw with, in hindsight, 2016, and like living through it in 2020. That's what I saw. And I'm always cautiously optimistic, but I feel like we're in a good track for 2022. But, unless you start actually changing the material condition of like people that just, they're not rich, they're not Christy Teigen, Mary John Legend, or anything like that. Like, some of us work for 9 to 5s, and like these are the people that will vote for you. And if you don't ignore them and you only cater to your donor class, then you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, thanks for that. Exactly. I think that's one of the, like you say, they're not, these people running for office aren't necessarily offering us anything, and at the same time we're not necessarily asking, right? We're not articulating what we want, and we need to do a better job of that, right? And that goes back to the same problem of organizing the working class, and which in the Western Gabriel Valley means majority Asian, and so we have a responsibility here in Western Gabriel Valley. We're the largest concentration of Asian diaspora in the continental U.S. is right here. We have a significant lower income population. We have a significant stratification, like you mentioned, the Cambodian, Hmong, we have a significant Burmese population here in Myanmar that are also low income, and organizing that solidarity, as well as with our Black and Latinx brothers and sisters, to do that and to take power and to articulate the material needs we have is, like it's key.
Yeah. It's very important, and that's what I like about the movement, that like the vigil that we had last Saturday. The community came out together. Like Frank Hampton had this quote. It's like, it's a rainbow coalition. We had a lot of Asian, Chicano, the Black community came in solidarity. Folks from all over San Gabriel Valley came to support and like kind of grieve together. And I don't remember hearing like Asian lives matter, and like I tried before to at least tell my students and tell my communities, like, please do not cooperate the Black Lives Matter movement. That's the movement for Black lives. And we have right now the Stop AAPI Hate right now. Don't put a yellow square onto your profiles or anything like that, or any of those performative things. But like, understand that, we are going through something that really affects us, and let's not try to appropriate other people's movements into the space. Yeah,
exactly. And like, the one that we went to last week was just great. It was like we said, it's two on the ground organizers, first time, two young women who organized it. It was great. And that's the type of rallies we need to support, and I'll always go to those. Can't always say that about the officialdom-based rallies, but well,
I'm going to one tomorrow, so
the walk across. Right.
I had a comment, and this was something that I pointed out to a friend. It's like they were saying like, oh, this rally is a little rough. I'm like, it's rallies like these you get people like AOC. Like, it may be rough now, but like, somebody in this crowd or somebody that organized this could be your next representative. Sometimes it takes something like this to really get people going. I think I remember, what was it, Castillo, Felipe Castillo, the one that the African American man that was shot because he had an actual license to carry a firearm. It was in his car. When he he passed away, and like the Black Lives Matter movement was like really big in Atlanta. Like you had a new city council that were the young Black people in the community that were saying like enough is enough. We need to change the dynamic of the city, and like you're not representing us, then we're gonna put people forward from the community to represent us.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I'm hopeful because of our youth, and yeah. So, I just wish that we had more assistance from our people in power right now, in that way, and not just performative type stuff that's being done. And
and actual like tangible actions, like like the Grace Ming is like one way to address the issue, but I think maybe grooming or like getting that next generation of leadership in there, at least that's how I see it. I know I'm very hyper focused on that, but in my mind's eye, like how else are you going to get people to represent you? And hopefully getting them to understand that, if you can get funding from a community versus trying to get these corporate donors or people that have special interests with, like, say, for example, apparently a development on Fremont.
Right.
So it's a matter of, yes, you're right. It's the education component, like knowing how to galvanize a community, but at the same time also like saying like, listen, you got there. How are you going to like help foster the new generation that's going to take up that mantle? Because I think for me, it's like, I know, and I love working in the work I do, but I know to some degree at some point, somebody's going to have to take up the mantle of like being the leader in this immigrant community center. At some point, somebody else needs to come by with a different vision and a different idea and to take up that mantle. And like, I understand that, and I'm doing my best to do the best I can with the years that I have. I know it sounds it's like final or something, but like understand, it's like, it's not forever. Like we don't have forever to do everything. So, or stay in power. Like I think power should be finite. It shouldn't be granted or given for no reason, nor it should be funded by special interests.
Right. Exactly.
So
Yep. I hear you.
So I think last thing, I know we were talking about earlier in the podcast about how your involvement with JPL and Caltech. I think we might want to finish up on maybe a happier note, or maybe on a both like a humanities level that we could be at least optimistic about. So I believe late last month we had the landing of Perseverance, and congratulations all around, Eric, and everybody that has been involved. I think my cousin he used to be a radio engineer back in the Marine times, and he's probably doing something very similar out there in JPL. But congratulations to everybody and folks that I know. But the specific thing about the project that you have done was the helicopter. Do you want to describe?
Yeah, sure. Too much credit's given when you say that I've done it. I helped out on it, and I think and congratulations to a lot of people. I think that this is a publicly funded endeavor, right, NASA, and it's just that JPL was the place that built a lot of it and operates it on Mars today. But a lot of people across NASA contributed, of course. And so I helped out with the helicopter. The concept has been around for a while, right? How do you explore the surface of other planets? And what we've done so far is with rovers, right? That are terribly slow, because out of necessity.
So we have Perseverance, that's the most recent one. We had Curiosity was the one before that, and
then we had Spirit and Opportunity in the early aughts, and the one that started it was the Pathfinder, which is the
Yes.
size of a skateboard roughly, back in the late 1997, I think it was. And then and yeah, so you know, because of the terrain and the fact that we cannot joystick the thing, right? It's not like someone's in the control room with a joystick driving the rover, because
Right.
um, it's so far away that, you know, the, although our radio signals travel roughly at the speed of light, it could take 15 minutes for the signal to get there, 15 minutes to come back. So you can't joystick it real time. So it's got to have autonomy, and because of that, it's going to go slow. And also, the wheels have to have a lot of torque, right, to go over
Mhm.
rocks and things. So high torque, low speed motors. Um, so what's another way that you can explore the surface of another planet is, if it has an atmosphere, to do it by air, right, or by the atmosphere, and in this case, a helicopter. And so the challenge with that is uh, the atmosphere is so thin that it's hard to get lift, right? So you have
Mhm.
to have really high speed rotors. And so I helped, I was helping out on concept studies back, I think it was 2011.
Mhm.
And so I, get more and more real. And then they said, well, let's go ahead and try to put a helicopter on this rover Perseverance as a demonstration to see if we can what we can do. And
Yeah,
um,
that's what I've been hearing. It's like it's not like I think it was like a trying to temper the public's excitement.
yeah,
It was like this is a proof of concept
that's right.
where basically it'll have only 30 seconds of flight, and where
Yeah,
this is will be the test bed. And I think recently, right now, like it should be able to take flight soon, like
yeah.
maybe in the summer, right?
Well, yeah, probably next month sometime. I
Hmm.
think they're gonna be able to try it. I think I'm not sure if they released information to the public yet, but I think it's sometime next month, and in April. And um, it's really uh, I work in the thermal fluids area at JPL, and a lot of the helicopter's limitations in terms of how long it can fly is based on its available energy in the battery
Right.
before it has to recharge. And the environment is so cold there, and with winds, and it needs to be kept warm at night to survive. To keep it at a decent temperature so things don't break.
Yeah,
And
that's
that,
that's the one thing I heard is that
yeah,
like even with the battery and its lifespan, 80% or something like that, 75 to 80% is devoted
yeah,
to keeping it warm
keeping it
than
warm.
than
Yeah,
flight. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we have uh, a lot of involvement with the Section 9 with at JPL, and one of the guys from our team is the thermal lead there, and I'm a big fan of his. We were able to hire him in, I think, back in 2015, and he's just done a great job. And so I take a lot of pride, so to speak, in seeing our younger folks really do some great things. And yeah, fingers crossed. Hopefully that
Hmm.
works. Yeah, and it could provide a new way of doing science in another planet, right? That you can
Hmm.
cover much more ground and get to places, have better views of things. So this helicopter does have a camera on it, so hopefully we will get pictures. And yeah, and future, and if it works out, then maybe future helicopters will have a lot of science instruments on it, right, to actually return science. So
Yeah, and perhaps
yeah,
maybe other bodies, right? Like,
yeah,
like this isn't the next mission also going to be Europa? So I've heard,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah, right,
a
right.
submarine.
Well, they want to. I think right now the one that's being built is an orbiter
Oh,
around
okay.
Europa. But yeah, when you talk to a lot of the science community, the astrobiology folks, very interested in Europa, very interested also in the moon of Saturn. So Europa is a
Hmm.
moon of Jupiter. There's also a moon
Jupiter.
of Saturn called Enceladus.
Enceladus. There you go.
Yes, right, right, right. And with heated plumes of what appears to be
Hmm.
water coming out, where when you have water, you have life, chance for life, and trying to get there. Europa has oceans beneath a thick ice crust, and how to bore through that ice crust, which could be tens of kilometers thick, and how to
Hmm.
get through there and to the ocean underneath with a probe that, like you say, a submarine that
Hmm.
can look for biosignatures in life. And that's exciting. Our area is heavily involved with that type of thing. The ice melt to get through the ice, getting through in the fluids, thermal fluids group where I'm from. And with that, I wanted to give you a movie recommendation that
Yes.
I don't know if I ever told you this, but there's this movie called Europa Report that came out years ago, but it's fascinating. And Europa Report, I think you could stream it. And it's an independent film. Great. They came to JPL to ask about advice, science advice in making the movie. It's just exciting. It's a thriller. And it's a hidden gem. And the reason
Hmm.
why it didn't get bigger, um, it didn't have legs in the theaters and things, is because it came out right before that, or right about the same time as that movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock.
Oh,
So it kind of got squashed. But Europa Report is fascinating and it's really neat. And
I definitely could
it's,
check it out. It's
yeah.
also it's on Prime Video for folks that have
Okay, cool.
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. And they go through that about getting through the ice layer and looking for life. And it's a thriller, so I won't spoil anything, but it's
Hmm.
yeah, it's exciting. So
Another detail that I looked into when it comes to the Perseverance project is like a lot of the folks that are coming in are folks that remember curiosity, folks that remember like were kids when some of the precursor, like some of the original rovers were on Mars. So I think there's a lot of younger talent, like
yeah.
especially when we're talking about the political side, I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of folks that are saying like, it's our younger talent that will have fresh eyes and fresh minds to think outside of the box, or create something that basically a submarine on a different body,
Yeah,
you know. So yeah,
exactly.
I'm really excited about some of these newer projects, and it
Yeah.
was the most nail biting thing that I saw. I think
Oh yeah.
personally because I do have family that are involved in that project, but also too it's like it provides more information about space, and I think
Yeah.
for the longest time I did want you to come on and talk about space and
Yeah.
science.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing is, space travel and you know, you um, and how to get to out of our solar system, right? And
Hmm.
uh, right now we have two spacecraft, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, that was launched in the 70s that have
Hmm.
gone just beyond our solar system, and it took them 40 plus years to do that. And how to get out there faster, right,
Hmm.
is a key. And I was involved with some of those concept studies on how to do that. But what's really interesting is that I think it was a couple of years ago, there was it looked like a big rock that was in the shape of a cigar called
Oh, Moo, right?
Oumuamua.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And, um, was it a probe from another planet? Things like that, And so there's a book that just came out. I forgot. Came out the other month about making the case for how it was possibly a scouting ship from an alien civilization.
Hmm.
Recently, I think last week, there was a paper came out saying that it was actually a chunk off a broken off chunk from a planet,
Hmm.
but it had this weird shape that's not common.
It's like a
And
disc, right?
yeah, disc and a long, elongated also.
Hmm.
I think the newest picture showed it as a disc. When it first came out, it was like a long, slender cigar shape. So yeah, it's fascinating. And yeah, the astrobiology folks and um, yeah, so it's exciting. It's really exciting, and I think that we have this happening in our backyard here, backyard of our San Gabriel Valley, and
Hmm.
uh, tapping the young talent that we have around here. And yeah, this is like a commentary on my part that um, you know we can do a lot better, I think, to engage uh, you know you know uh, um, uh, people who have been left out traditionally. This
Hmm.
false meritocracy we have. I can tell you for a fact that you know to do my job,
Hmm.
it doesn't take um, a genius. You know, yeah, I had to go through a lot of training, but I don't believe that was necessary. And I don't believe that we people are creative who are don't have who are being kept out because they haven't gone through to the best schools or jumped through the hoops. And I don't think that's right. So especially for an institution that's almost entirely publicly funded. So
Hmm.
yeah, not trying to take away from the talent that's at JPL who's made these things possible, but um, I think a lot of people deserve a chance at that. I'm fortunate to have that, but I think, yeah. So, and I think there's recruiting that's done at historically black colleges and things, but uh, I think we can do better. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember when I think the launch initially happened. I think it was around the BLM movement, and the poem that came out like 1968, 1969,
oh,
like
yeah,
Whitey on the Moon,
yeah, Gil Scott Heron, right? Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
just to think is like, to some degree, there's been a lot of progress, but I think there's still a lot of progress to be made.
yeah,
I don't know this is a science thing bridging onto political things, but
right,
it is true. Like, I think
yeah,
NASA does have a place into providing more science, more study. I
yeah,
think every year there's always like an annual book that comes out. It's like an audit of all the new things that science has created from NASA that could have applications in commercial uses. So I was like,
yeah,
that
yeah,
should be public news everywhere, like
right,
that. Like,
right,
how else are you going to have communities understand the
right,
what NASA does and like how it contributes to society. And
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, so it would, yeah, yeah, so I think that, uh, outreach is a critical part that needs to be better funded, I think,
Mhm.
NASA, education, reaching out to underserved communities, um, which we try to do. When I do outreach pre-COVID, that's what I would try to focus on. And and we are doing that, but yeah, I think I guess we can all do better, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
yeah,
With a publicly funded place that keeps getting its funding cut, I imagine it's like, I
yeah,
always
yeah,
see, like the difference is how the US budget is like at the
right,
end of like that they have like, well, this is where your taxes has gone. And I see the budget
yeah,
as it goes down. I'm like, oh God.
yeah, 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 exactly. Science took a real hit under the Trump administration. It's crazy, and
Hmm.
yeah, and yet military industrial complex, locally here, the police state. We're basically serving a law enforcement economy here. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just ridiculous that we put out recently. A couple cities here put out measures for sales tax increases for what they say was for hiring more police officers, right? And
Hmm.
it's a double whammy. A sales tax is regressive.
Hmm.
It's funding police to protect private property. If anything, that tax should be put on parcels, property owners tax, not people who need to buy household goods, who are struggling already. Um, and it's all having to increase revenue. The cities have to increase sales
Hmm.
tax revenue, build more things to do that. And it's all for that police state economy, right? And it's just, it's death spiral until we can change that. So
or find a new person that can, like I really hope to see more satellites, more Elon Musk has really put the whole kibosh on
yeah,
satellites, but like I want to see more development and more interesting new projects. Um I don't know where I heard this, but I remember like putting balloons onto Venus, like
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
um, I want to see more than that, than
yeah,
than
yeah,
contributing to our current, status of a police state.
yeah, exactly. It's I yeah. To me,
Hmm.
it's tough to do anything when so much of the budget's dedicated to that
Hmm.
type of thing. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Oh,
for folks that, say it's like we can never defund the police, but I always say like we've been defunding education for the longest time. I'm sure
mhm.
there can be some cuts to
Yeah,
some degree.
yeah. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's really crazy, and in this area here where I think I may have mentioned this to you before, where you know we have we have 70% of our households speak a language other than English at home,
Hmm.
yet we have no publicly funded ESL program here because of the reduction back, I think it's 2011, where the taxes economy was slumping still, and taxes
Hmm.
uh, uh, weren't generating enough for the school system, so they cut the adult education program, and it's just never
I
came
remember
back.
that. I was in high school when that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Like
yeah,
what they basically like I think when I graduated 2012, it's like, oh yeah, that's when the adult school sign went down.
yeah, and I think a lot of people may not realize that big part of that was the redevelopment agency that funneled tax increment revenues into itself. So
Hmm.
so there was a big California redevelopment agency, and Alhambra was like the poster boy for how to exploit that by um, uh, you know taking out getting financing based on future tax revenues,
Hmm.
and the improvements, so-called improvements made, that would bring in more property taxes as the value goes up, and sales tax for the city. Um, and what was really ridiculous is that it did a lot of it used eminent domain in some cases. It did a lot of churn, uh, brought in housing, luxury housing. There was not any affordable housing, so to speak of, coming in,
Hmm.
and the tax increment um, that was coming in because of that, or they thought it was because of that, by law had to go back into that redevelopment machine, and could not be split as it usually would have with the schools.
Hmm.
And so, but what's sadly ironic in our case is that um, the increase in values here in the property tax increase revenues from property taxes were due, no question about it, we know that now, was due mostly to our school system that was performing well,
Hmm.
and uh, making it a place where a lot of families wanted to come in if they could afford it. And the value held or went up in a lot of these neighborhoods. And so what was ironic was that what they considered to be increases in tax revenue due to the redevelopment that was happening was really not the case. Yet it was based on the performance of our kids and teachers, right? And yet that
Hmm.
money increase could not go back to the school system. It had to go back into the redevelopment machine, which is a complete neoliberal trickle down mentality that did not work, and we know that now.
Yeah.
And flaunting all these affordable housing needs and not building it is what I'm saying, and
I think I
contribute.
remember hearing about that like 2018, 2019. I think that was the big thing for the midterms and like leading up to the 2020 election, that like really trying to push for more of like our tax dollars to go towards
Yeah,
education. And
yeah,
I was like thinking, it's like, what was the mechanism before if that wasn't the case?
yeah, right,
You
right,
know?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and so yeah, and and we're still relying on the market to develop our cities in real estate and investors and speculators, and it's not working, and it's not going to work, and the commodification of housing, as we talked about before. And
Yeah.
yeah, so uh, looking forward to some of our younger folks, making a change. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
I really hope so, and especially when it comes to folks that are going to be deciding to move here. I know that there's technically a California exodus right now, but I see our communities grow, even in the time of COVID. So I hope we can like enlighten as many of the younger people in the community, and like those that are underserved, that don't have those resources
yeah,
to speak up for themselves. I know
yeah,
I hope we can have another parent track. I know you remember the work we used to do with our parents for our ESL program, and there were the biggest folks that were calling for equitable housing and like more,
right,
more families to be able to live
yeah,
and work in the San Gabriel Valley. So,
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah,
I I I hope I feel hopeful for 2022. I know we
yeah,
still need to live in the present. I know COVID is still a thing. That's why we're doing this podcast on Zoom,
yeah, 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 yeah.
rather in, I guess, my house or somewhere else.
Mhm,
So like I hope we can be more positive and more forward. But I
mhm.
think it's just trying to live in the present, trying to be there for each other now. I think that really puts us into perspective,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
at least in the context of coronavirus. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
hope we can do this again in
yeah,
person. Hopefully,
yeah.
maybe JPL, huh? I wonder if they have like a little office where we could work, we would do a
Well,
podcast.
yeah, they'll probably make you go through the public outreach office. They're all they hold a
Yeah.
tight control over such things, and
A
yeah,
bunch of
so
NDAs. Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah,
of course.
yeah, sure, yeah,
But yeah, hopefully we could connect again, probably in
yeah,
person. I hope so.
yeah, that'd be
Um,
great. Yeah,
and thank you for being on the podcast. And
no,
anytime, I'm sure we probably have like another couple of things that we haven't gone through.
sure, yeah.
But hopefully we can have you again on this podcast.
Thanks.
And
Yeah, always happy to talk to you, Brian. Thanks for the work you do for the community and for doing this. It's important, and um, I did want to announce one thing is that we're planning a set of information workshops, academy type
mhm,
meetings, community meetings in the fall, hopefully. And
mhm.
we're getting some speakers, everything from urban planning issues to uh, environmental issues that we have in the Western Gabriel Valley, and um, and and other things. So
I definitely want to be there
yeah,
because I do love hiking, and I do like the um some of the newer things that are coming out about like addressing the green issues and green jobs, and I
yeah,
guess the push for the San Gabriel Mountains to be a national park, or the Angeles Forest by that
Angeles
matter.
Forest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, more public funding for keeping our
mhm,
forests in check.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, Brian. Oh, it's good talking to you.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for your
Th-
work.
Thank you for being on this podcast. Hope you like and enjoy. Subscribe, and we'll continue, of course, our conversations of BLM and stop AAPI hate, or anything that we want to communicate. I'm gonna try to be that kind of voice in San Gabriel. Yeah, I don't know if that's the best thing to say, but I'll try my best to put a light in to those subjects. So thank you for being on this podcast.
Thank you.